Hello, everybody. This is Chris Dew with E1, and I'm excited that we get to spend a little bit of time together today. Our team has been working on, I'll say, the migration story, really dedicated the last couple of years, and we've done some really great projects, and I think from that we've done a lot of learning, and I think while we've been doing a lot of these projects the last few months, we really want to share this knowledge and help the greater community of our partners to really have a tool that helps them in their whole migration journey and story for their customer base. So that's what we're going to focus on today is the tool that you have at your disposal with Popdock to be able to really deliver this in a cost-effective and efficient way. So we're going to jump right in. Quickly on the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the Popdock Data Lake Upload tool and make some comparisons to what is available in Microsoft's cloud migration toolset, just so we have some baselines there. And again, we'll just talk about some of the good things and the bad things that are there in both of them. We're actually going to dive right in. We're going to get really technical on a couple of these points today. And I guess when I say technical, I don't mean like scary technical. I'm saying we're going to actually do it, is what I mean. We're going to get down to it and show how easy it is to do some of these things. So we're going to set up a Microsoft Data Lake, and we're going to, point Popdock to that and connect to it. And then we're going to actually go through a sample migration. So I want you to understand all of those pieces to it. And then again, the most important part is how do we actually see that data when we're done? So that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. So let's jump right in. What is so powerful about this? I think you'll find that with the Popdock as part of your solution, that things are going to be simpler. They're going to be a lot faster, and it's going to be easier to maintain and use this data as you go forward. So I said we get into comparison. Let's jump right into that right now. Many of you maybe have had some exposure to what is available from Microsoft's cloud migration tool. So let's talk about what are some of the things that are there, and again, maybe what some of those gaps are. One of the things, and there's kind of two parts to this. I'll be really careful in this, right? There's part of the cloud migration tool actually does where it'll grab some of the master records and open transactions, and it'll move that information to the Business Central tenant. So that's certainly one part of it. We're going to draw some comparisons to what E1 offers on that a little bit later. But there's another component to it as well, where they will allow you to archive a lot of the data that's sitting in your GP database, and they do use a data lake, and so they will move some of that. But some of the problems is they don't move the third-party data. Right, so what does that mean? Anything you have an extender, obviously, is a pretty big one, but it's other third parties as well, other ISVs, any other custom data that you have, they aren't aware of that. And so you really can't move that to the data lake without, and I have in red, without writing code. So if you're don't want to write a bunch of AL code to move that to custom tables or custom data lake, that's not there. Again, just to point out, it moves the tables to the data lake, so it actually doesn't move. It doesn't move maybe the smart lists, if we call it that way, where things that you're used to with human readable names, we'll say, and maybe the joins already on tables. It just basically is a dump of all the tables and dumping that into Azure for you to, potentially do something with later. One other thing too, for some people, is that they don't actually need to move everything, right? They may only want a subset. Maybe it's just sales transaction history, or maybe it's, apply information on the payable side of things. Whatever it is, some people only need a subset of that, as well as like maybe the GL history. But we give you options on what you need to move. And then I think one thing that's fairly important too is it does require an integration runtime from Azure, and that's a fairly complex thing to set up. And so that's one of the aspects as well as you're trying to expose your on-premise system to a cloud-based tool, that's where the complexity and security concerns and all those things start working their way in. Okay, so insert the Popdock data lake upload tool. Maybe just to specify something real quickly, this is part of Popdock. This is not a special purchase. So this is just something that you will get with your Popdock subscription, and there's no additional charge. It does it does require the business or higher edition of it to use it, but that's really the only requirement. So we're going to focus on this part is archiving a lot of that history that you're just not going to get with any of the standard tools. And then again, we're going to focus on how we can actually view that information as well. So what does the Popdock Data Lake Upload tool do, right? It archives not only all of the system data, but it brings all your smart lists, right? So if we're talking about GP, it brings your smart lists. There's probably a few partners on here that have customers still on SL. So we have an option in there to do SL data as well. So it's instead of smart lists inside of there, it's quick queries. We have some nav pieces in there as well, and we're enhancing those even more. So we're going to have some more of those standard lists that you would expect as opposed to just table dumps. As well as we can move the entire database. So I call it two places, right? The lists that you use every day. And again, for the GP people, that oftentimes is their smart lists. And then the insurance policy, where you're able to back up the entire GP database that you want, just in case you ever needed to, go access something that wasn't in one of those smart lists. Another key point, right, is you can move third-party data now. So that's not an issue, right? Anything that was built in SmartList or SmartList Builder or even SmartList Designer, or even let's go way beyond that. What if you only have it in a view, or maybe it's on a custom table? We can move all of that data using this Popdock Data Lake tool. It will, like I said, it'll archive these lists and tables to an Azure Data Lake. So we're going to get into that part. So it does all of that for you. Again, oftentimes a tool associated with a lot of development, right? A lot of time and development. We're going to show you how easy this tool is to use and how it eliminates a lot of that complexity. And then most importantly, I probably can't say it enough, is you're getting the lists that you're used to using already, right? With the user-friendly names. If it says customer number or document date, it actually is, that's what you're going to see instead of the cryptic names that would be behind the scenes in the database. Okay, a couple more things to point out on the Popdock Data Lake upload tool before we jump into this. One of the most important things, and I talked about security just briefly on the cloud migration side of things, but this runs inside of a client environment. So that means we are changing really the paradigm. We're changing it to be a push to the data lake as opposed to a pull. And what that gets us is a lot of security perks as well as some performance ones as well. So that means you don't have to put a hole in a firewall. I work with a lot of IT people. That is one of their biggest concerns, right? They've tried to keep all these years, they've tried to keep their on-premise system. They've tried to ensure that it is secure, that people aren't getting in that shouldn't be getting in. They don't want to usually open it up to external cloud applications. And so for this, if you're choosing to archive this data to the data lake, this is a great way because it changes it to a push to the data lake, and then now they don't have to poke any holes in their firewall, no ports, none of those things, and that makes IT people a lot happier. The other part is that we can move the data as fast as we can extract it and as fast as we can upload it. So there's kind of two parts to it. It does not need to be run on a server machine, doesn't have to be running on the same machine as the SQL server where the data is stored. It needs to be on the customer's network. And again, it's good to have a good machine. The other part is it should be in a place that has a good upload speed as far as internet. So I have seen a few people that were trying to do stuff through a VPN, and they were in a remote place with a bad upload speed. That's not a good way of doing this, right? Especially if they have, depending on how much data they have, if they have hundreds of gigabytes of data that you need to move, put it in a good place. And then most importantly, I think, is that we do provide a mechanism to, if there are any errors that surface, we allow you to fix those. So there's a quick little overview of some of those tools. Now I want to spend the bulk of our time today here really showing you how you can do this as well, right? It's not something that you need the E1 team for all the time. It's something that your organization can start doing over and over again and getting very efficient at it. Okay, so we're going to start with the first part, right? We've talked about a data lake. A lot of people, that's very ambiguous. They don't maybe know exactly what does a data lake mean. And I guess I want to spend the next few minutes just really going through how easy it is to set this up and connect to it with Popdock. So let's do our first little jump here. I'm going to take you right inside of my Azure account. So all a data lake really is a storage account inside of your Azure. And again, this will be the customer's Azure instance. So I'm going to create a brand new storage account. And I'll put it in this group. Okay, I'm going to be very, I'm just going to call it what we're using today for our training. So I'm going to call it the Popdock data lake upload tool demo. And I'm going to put this in the same region where Popdock is hosted. In my example, I'm in the US, so I'm going to put it in the north central US, which is where everything is. Okay, I'm going to maybe just spend a couple moments here talking about some of the concerns people have when they set these up. There's a couple little options. There's only two main things that you need to know, but people get stuck on should it be standard versus premium. In all the testing that we've done, we haven't really seen a huge improvement in performance. And so I guess we'd probably recommend that you do standard. It's a bit cheaper than premium as well. The second thing is, if you want to make sure that this is backed up outside of the Azure data center where everything else is, then you would pick a geo-redundant option. Otherwise, if you're okay with just the backup being in the data center, that's fine. It essentially doubles the amount of the cost each month, depending on what you choose there. Okay, the next thing that's really important on this one is really this enable hierarchical namespace. Say that 100 times. That is basically going to give us folders, if you will, right? So if you have more than one company, for example, we're going to store it in a different folder. And that is probably the biggest area. Those two things are what you need to know. The only other thing I'll point out here is some people think that maybe changing it to cool is actually going to save them some money. I have not found that to be the case. I've actually seen the prices go up if you choose cool instead of hot. And so I'd recommend doing this because it gives you better performance than a cool storage. So that's really all we need to do is we'll just review that. And now, after we get that, we're going to do a creation. So literally, if I had quit talking a little bit sooner, we'd have had that created in about 30 seconds. So that's how easy it is to set up a data lake, which is again, simply a Azure storage account. Okay, while this is just finishing up, looks like it's getting close. I would just encourage you, if you do have some questions, to please use the questions portion of the GoToWebinar. and we'll get to those. If I can't get to them now, we'll get to them at the end. All right, looks like we're done. So there's a couple things that are going to be important in here. I'm going to copy a couple of these pieces of information so that I can use it later. So give me 1 second here, and I'll kind of talk you through this. Okay, so the very first thing, if we look at this, now we have a storage account called PDLUT demo, Popdock Data Lake Upload Tool demo. The second part we have to do inside of here is we have to create a container. So it's very simple to do that. My recommendation is, like, again, we're going to recommend that you run this more than one time. So I'm going to call one GP lists in this case. And I'm going to create a second container as well called GP tables. This is kind of a best practice. We have this, I'm going to come back to this in just a second, or just a few minutes. I'm going to get into the documentation we have to help you on how to do this as you go forward. But we'll have two containers where we're going to put this information inside of here. And then the last thing that's really important is that you're going to need to connect to this this data lake account. And so there'll be a couple of keys inside of here, which is what we're going to use. So I'm just going to grab this key and I'm going to paste this over into my notepad over here on my other screen real quick. So just 1 second. Okay, so that's really, we're done inside of Azure now. Again, that didn't look like much of a development exercise, did it? So where we're going to go next is inside of Popdock, and how do we connect to a data lake? So we'll go in and we're going to add a new connector. Again, you can see we have a million connectors in here. Obviously, we have support for not only the newer Microsoft ones, but obviously to help out with the migration, the GP, NAV, SL to bring those as well. So this one, we're going to be pumping data or getting access data from the data lake in this case. So we'll pick the data lake storage gen 2. The storage account is what I just created for you. And so that's called PDLUT demo. The container on this one, I'm going to just use my GP lists one. And then here's the key on this one, is that's a big, long, ugly shared key. So I'll hit validate, and if everything goes well, just a second, I maybe didn't get the key right. Okay, what else didn't I get right? Should have everything right here. Okay, well, I look like I have some kind of issue with my my key. Let me try one. Okay, last time I'll try the second key here. All right, I don't know, maybe I copied the key wrong. Apologize for that. Okay, so now we're connected to one data lake. You can see it's creating it here. I'm going to rename this just for a second, or in a second, because it'll make it a lot easier as we go into it. Okay, so there we go. That's going to be the name of my data lake. So now, again, in just a few moments here, we were able to not only set up a brand new data lake, but we were also able to connect to it with Popdock. So that takes us to really the next portion of this, right? Is how do we go about populating the data in that data lake? So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into a demo of this now. This is the Popdock Data Lake upload tool, which is available on our website to download. The first thing you're going to get prompted for when you fire it up is, are you doing some GP stuff? Are you doing SL stuff? Are you doing nav? Or again, more generically, are you moving some archiving some SQL server tables? So I'm just going to run the smart list one to begin with. You will log into your Popdock account. That's the first thing you do, because then it knows everything about the data lakes we have available, and all the connectors and all those things, and it's going to do that upload right there. Okay, you'll see we can pick our connectors. So I need to pick the new one I just created. All right, I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm just gonna fire it up again because I think it had cached that from when I logged in earlier. One more time. Hey, we're showing it's real. Okay, we'll log in again. If you do in more than one account, which you may have for if you're working on several customer sites, like mine, I have way too many, which is why mine takes a little bit longer. Okay, so here we go. Now we're to data lakes. I should have a new one in here. Oh, come on. I did rename it, right? I'm just not seeing it. Okay, well, let me let me just move forward. I'm going to use an existing one that I use for this one. Okay, and this is the container that I have in that data lake, and so I'm just going to connect to that one instead. Okay, here's the important part. After you've connected to your data lake, you are going to pick, in this case, since we did GP, you're going to pick the version of GP that's needed. And so this is going to be important because there are going to be smart list differences depending on how far you go back. We currently have all the way back to 9. Let us know if you have need for something further back than that. But we're going to try to give you as many options to get as close as we can to getting all those smart list changes. You're basically going to connect to your SQL server. Most of you are probably going to have more of an on-prem name for your server instead of mine. I happen to open this one up to a small group of IP addresses, but that's why I have this name. But most of you will just have something like SQL Server and maybe an instance on it. You can pick your port if there's something there, and then you're on to your Dynamics database. So in my case, it's called GP Dynamics. This is important because this is going to allow us to pick more than one company in there. And then you're going to pass in what the user that you need to do to connect to this. This does not need to be SA. I think this is an important part, is that If someone is still concerned about the security of their data, this just needs to be somebody that has capabilities of reading from the Dynamics database as well as the company databases. And so as long as they have the read permissions, we can use that. So now we'll connect to that GP system. It's loading up all of the companies first. So you can see in this example, I have 3. Some of you are going to have way more though, or maybe just 1 or 100. And we had somebody the other day had 200 and some companies. And so whatever it is, this gives you an opportunity to be able to unmark some of them. And I think that's important because a lot of times people have test companies. And so if you don't want to archive those, if you don't need to, you can just uncheck that. In my case, I really don't have any data in this one. And so I'm going to use it for demonstration purposes that I'm only going to bring data from 2 companies. After that, you'll get, in this case, all of your smart lists. Or again, if we were doing SL, you would get quick queries, but we're focused on GP on this one today. This is going to give you all of your smart lists, whether they're standard, built with Smart List Builder, or built with Smart List Designer. You can pull any of these in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run everything for now. This will take a little bit longer, but I want to, in just a second here, you'll see a lot of these are very, very quick as it's bringing these, except for when we start hitting this account transactions. This one happens to have 300 and some thousand records, which takes just a few moments. So I wanted to show you what you're seeing right now, right? Is it's grabbing all of the rows out of the SQL table. It's then the second part is after it does that, it has to start the upload. So like I said, we're about halfway there in 10 seconds. It's probably going to take another 10 seconds. And then it's going to start the upload of that little bit larger file to the data lake. While it's doing that as well, though, if we look at this up at the top, you can see this will tell you how many transactions. What does transactions mean? It basically means SQL, right? How many lists are we running through here? And so this tells you how many it's going to do. Again, if you do 10 companies or 100 companies, it's going to do a lot more. So that's kind of the key thing here. It tells you how many are left. It tells you how many have been completed. There's a couple of other statuses. There is a status that says what has failed, right? So if anything has failed as we're bringing that information up, or we also have another status that is skipped. So that means there's a lot of times where you may not be using all of the smart lists, for example. So everybody always hits check all, but what happens if you're not using manufacturing or project, or maybe again, in some companies, you don't have all those things configured. One example I'm going to show you in a second, I've set it up to get some errors. And some of them are because I have extender windows in one company and I don't have the extender window set up in another company. So that's a really common one that we'll see. Okay, this one looks like it's just about done. I think it's roughly 150, maybe just a little bit more than that, megabytes for this file that's getting uploaded. And so once this one's done, then things kind of start flying. I just have one larger table inside of here, but we've done examples where, I mean, we've done 20 million, 30 million rows, and this is where the performance of both getting the data out, and then the upload speed is really what influences that. Okay. Let's go into, I'm going to grab a couple questions here now as we're just waiting for this to finish. So one of the questions is, how fast is the data push extraction? Tables rows per minute. Example, how long does it take to push 25 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes? Okay. This is one of those questions, right, where there's 2 components, right? How fast can we get it out? So is it a good SQL Server? When we're saying give me 1 million rows out of that table, how long does it take us to do that? So that's one aspect of it. The second part is if we have to upload. So if we are uploading 25 gigabytes of data, right, it goes back to your upload speed. So if you're on a good network that has that upload speed, then it's going to be really, really fast. If it's on a slower one, then it's going to be slower. So it's really hard to give you a hard and fast rule. I think right now in the example that I'm showing you, I'm moving about, I think, 5 gigabytes of data possibly, and it's moving in probably all said and told about 5 minutes, I suppose. So extracting it and pushing it up in about 5 minutes. So yep, good question. Okay, another one, just going back, will Popdock replace configuration packages during the customer implementation, or is it simply an area to house the customer history? We're going to come back to this in just a little bit, but it is the focus of the Popdock portion of this is to get all the history from GP and to allow you to access it. We'll come back to it again, but Smart Connect is really the tool that would replace the configuration packages. So we've heard a lot of people talk about maybe how complex they are, maybe how many times you have to do different things in order to set up something you could have done in one Smart Connect map, or even we've seen some slowness on a lot of them. So Smart Connect is the tool that will help you do those things. Okay. Another question is, how do you launch the Popdock Azure Data Lake upload tool? And so that you download that from our website, and then you'll install that onto the customer's network somewhere. And then it's just called Popdock Data Lake Upload Tool. Okay. Are the settings saved between runs, or do you have to go through selecting the lists you want to run each time they're run? Yeah, unfortunately, we did this as a mechanism to help you guys not make mistakes. We've chosen not to save the settings in there because we want to make sure that if you are doing this for multiple customers, that you don't accidentally log into the wrong account and push all this stuff to another customer's account. So we want to make sure that you do log in each time and are in the right account and putting it in the right data lake. Yep, good question. What technology is the upload tool based on? I mean, it's part of Popdock, but it's using Azure Data Lake behind the scenes. It's obviously hitting SQL, so it's just part of the same library that we are using to access all of the data connectors that we would in Popdock. Okay, let me. We just finished. I'll come back to some of the additional questions a little bit later. So what I want to show you, we got a lot of successes, but let's sort by the status. We didn't get all successes. You can see down here, we had a number of these lists actually that were skipped, right? We maybe don't have data in these employee ones or some of these things. So a lot of these were skipped, or again, like I told you, this 4iron Foundry company, there's not much data in this one. So a lot of these were actually skipped in that particular company. But let's focus on the failures for just a second. 2 of them did occur in Fabricam, and most of them occurred in this one. And the reason they failed, a lot of these were really around extender information that we had on there. So it'll give you a little bit of information on what it is, but we also give you the capability of going back to the log and saying, hey, this failed because it couldn't find that extender window in this company. So that's what most of these are. A couple of these actually I've designed to fail just to make sure that I actually have a failure whenever I demonstrate this. So 2 key things here, right? You can always go back to the log and find details and say, yeah, you're right. We see this a lot. People maybe are doing views and the view hasn't worked in 5 years. And so we're trying to do a view that doesn't work, and they go in and go, oh yeah, that's right. There's stuff in that view that actually it would never run. So we find a lot of things like that. It's usually not issues with on the GP side of things. But the key is if you wanted to rerun one of these, so I'll pick both of these. You can choose to rerun the failure, and so now it ran them both again and failed once again. So that's kind of a key part there. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit run again, But what I want to just show you, I'm not going to go through the whole process here. What this does is this allows me to have a second pass at it, right? So I can now say, I actually want to archive the entire database. And this, I think, is really, really powerful because people are mostly going to use the smart lists in this case, or again, quick queries if they're on the SL side of things. That's probably what they're going to mostly use because those are the lists they're already comfortable with. But just being able to access anything, I think is just a really good insurance policy. So I'm going to switch this to a different data lake. I'm going to go to, I have one for my GP tables. And again, I'm pointing to the same database. So that does, again, and the question is like, if you hit run again, it does actually keep, you don't have to log everything in again. But now we're seeing a little different interface, right? Instead of seeing the company names, we're actually seeing databases. And this is important distinction, I guess, because we're dumping the entire database, and you get to choose which ones you want, as well as this time you get the Dynamics database that we can archive that one if you want as well. So the last thing we'll do here is you'll see there's two parts to this even. This actually gives you all of the views. So I know many of customers, maybe you probably have created a lot of these, you have SQL views in there that are meaningful, right? Maybe they got used in an SSRS report or some other kind of thing, but there's a lot of times people put some good amount of work into getting a SQL view that they're using. So most of these are just garbage ones inside of here, but if you do have one, feel free to check it, and then it'll move your view as well as the tables. So that's just one extra little thing. Okay, I'm not going to hit this next run button because it would actually start moving every table. So we do, on the table side of things, we don't give you an option. We're saying we're moving the entire database. The view side of things, we realize some people only want to move a couple of views. So that's just an option there. So there you go. There's a quick little view of how you can use this tool for archiving that data on your customers. Okay, and again, I think maybe just one point to hammer home is that it solves a lot of security issues that we have seen in the past because we don't have to open up any holes in the firewall, and it changes that paradigm from pulling to the data lake to actually doing a push, which is pretty powerful. Okay, I think one of the last areas we're going to focus on that's pretty important is that who cares if we can extract it out? The most important part is how do I see this data? And that's what we're going to get into next. And so that's the next part. We're going to show you how do I make this look like this inside of Business Central? How do I give my end users access to see the data? So let's jump into that part. Okay, I'm going to start inside of Business Central, right, and show you what we have today, right? So if I pull up Popdock, and again, those are just some standard, it's pulling standard BC data, but here's the key. So instead of switching from seeing Business Central information, I can switch to some scenarios where I have information that I've stored in the data lake and made available with Popdock. Now, this isn't the focus here. I do want to point out one thing. There are some people that instead of archiving it to a data lake, they actually choose to keep a SQL server running. And so we have options there. We do have a gateway. Some people put it in the cloud, whatever it may be, but we do have ways that you can hook into that data directly. But for most people, we see them, they want to, at some point in time, retire that SQL server. And that's really what we've been focused on today. So we moved the data, extracted it out of GP, moved it to a data lake, and now Popdock has made this available inside of here. So if I want to look at some payables transactions, for example, I can pull this record up and I can, there we go. The first time it pulls up the the data lake list is a little slow. And now we're actually pulling data that used to be in GP just a moment ago and now is sitting in a data lake. We can still do fun things, right? If I want some 1099 fields on here, I can quickly add those, right? And now I have given this user interface to my end user that's a lot like those smart lists that they're comfortable with coming from GP. So this is one of those immediate things for your GP users to help them get comfortable with using Business Central. Is the history that we have inside of here becomes really, really easy for them to use because we've given them that smart list type interface. Now, I'm showing you one that I had already put out there, but what about all the lists that we just did? So I want to show you how easy it is to embed some new history inside of here. So if we go back to Popdock now, we're going to go into the widget. And this is the main widget that's embedded inside of Business Central. If I go into lists, you'll see I have a bunch of the standard BC ones, but then I have some additional groups, if you will, where I have some of these history scenarios. So we're going to choose to add a brand new list. I'm going to add it to the GP data lake, and we're going to grab it from where I have those GP ones. So let's just move. You know what? I'm going to do a really easy one to see, ZZ. So I'm just going to move some inventory lists. So if I go back now to Business Central, and I'm just going to hit refresh on this. If I go back into the GP data lake, look at this. We now have this other list that is sitting inside of the data lake. If I pick the company that I want to see it from, I'm now pulling, looks like this is just inventory items on this ZZ inventory list, but that was a custom smart list that came from GP. We pushed it to the data lake, and in a couple seconds, we made it available. Again, we can interact with it and add any columns. We can add, an unlimited amount of filters, right? Just like you can on any list. So working with the data lake is no different. We can have as many filters as we like. So all those comfortable things are still there. And that was pretty easy. Now, I'm gonna turn it up just one more notch here, because this is a really common scenario that we see is people go, okay, that's great. You've given me maybe some history. You've given me capability of pulling it up each time. Maybe I use favorites, right? Those are all built in, all those fun things. But what if I actually wanted to see that embedded on a page inside of Business Central? And this is where it gets really, really fun, is that I have the capability. So here's our buddy Aaron Fitz, right? He's made the journey from GP to Business Central. But what do we have down here? We have Popdock once again. So we've given you this same interface that allows me to filter everything down, and I've done something kind of special, right? We expect a lot of history, right? This is mostly, if you see the source connector, it actually says this is history coming from GP, right? So this is information we archived in the data lake, but if anybody had a sharp eye, you could see it changes. So we have history, but we also have open transactions for this particular customer, because that's a special feature of Popdock that we can combine information from more than one system. So I've combined live data from BC with the historical data that we moved to the data lake, and now I have one list. I have it embedded onto any page inside of Business Central, and you don't have to write any code to make any of that happen. I think that's a really key part to this whole thing. Okay, so let's go back to this. We focused on the whole history and migration stuff and everything like that. But I mean, is there more that the customer can do from this? And I'd have to say yes, there is. So what more can we do, right? With Popdock, we give you Smart List Builder, right? This is a big thing. You can basically build brand new smart lists off of new Business Central data. And we give you an interface like this that allows me to add any table. So this goes down to the table level of Business Central, which nothing else can do without writing code. So we are pulling absolutely everything inside of here. You can see here I have some information from custom extensions. So anything that you do custom for a customer, we can pull any of that data in. And it's as easy after you do that, you pick whatever columns you want, tick, tick, tick. You can put it in permanent restrictions to further optimize this. And this will, at the end of the day, will create the most optimized read-only query of this data. And again, make it available in Popdock and make it available to end users. So it is essentially what your users had with Smart List Builder inside of GP, they now have for Business Central as well. Another key part to this, right? I didn't really focus on this before, but if I go back to just the home page here, and I'll pull up Popdock once again, what I want to show you is that it's not just for history data. That's obviously been our focus today, but this is actually reporting off of live BC data. This is purchase transactions. This also allows us to do multi-company, right? So if I have more than one BC company, I can now do this type of information where I pull from both the Kronos EU and Kronos US. Business Central might be having a little bit of a slow day. Okay, and so there we go. Now if I just do this, I'll just do a quick grouping. So now we have, here's all the transactions from Kronos EU. We have our subtotals by whatever we grouped on, and then here's everything from the Kronos US. So these are things that your customers automatically are going to get, whether it's the history data or again, if it's the live Business Central data. I think another thing that if I didn't talk about this, I'd probably be doing you very much a disservice. We're showing data inside of Business Central, but it doesn't just have to live here, right? If you want to see archived GP data somewhere else, you can. So let me give you two quick examples. If I click on this tab, I have Popdock once again embedded inside of Teams. It looks and feels like Teams, but guess what? This is your Popdock interface where you can filter it down. This is GP project information that was archived. I'm now showing you right inside of here. If I wanted to put it in more of a CRM system, here's an example. I have orders that are coming from, again, this in this case it's live Business Central, but it could be live and archived GP. And now I have Popdock embedded inside of here. Looks and feels like this system and gives you access to all of that data. So there's just a couple of quick little hits. Now, some of you might be getting outside of the GP space, right? The Microsoft space even. And so we've given you the same types of tools in literally in minutes and without writing code most of the time. I can do something like this, and now I have Business Central data sitting right inside of Salesforce. So if you have somebody that may be looking at other systems, you have the tools with Popdock to do this without writing a ton of code and be able to do that. Okay, so there's just a couple of quick little things I wanted to get to because this is so much more than just a migration tool. It is a key part of it, but there's so many more things that your customers can use. So just to do a quick recap before I get into the closing questions and things like that. This tool allows you to securely connect to your Dynamics GP data, right? No holes in the firewall, no IT people to get angry. It allows you to quickly and easily move that data as fast as your pipe allows to the data lake and archive it there. And then the most important part is after it's been moved, we allow you to access it and report off of that data inside of Business Central or a whole host of other places. And all that is without development. And for me, that is just a huge area in here because I think you can quickly spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars doing some of these projects when it comes down to migration. And we have a tool that will help you be a lot more efficient at that. Okay, a key component of what I've shown you today is that we have very full documentation on exactly what you need to do, how you need to set up a data lake, how you need to, configure everything and run this. So I would encourage you to go out. We have a link in here. We're going to make this available, but you can click on that setup guide and it will take you through every step. So this is a very thorough guide. We're really proud of these, and I encourage you to use them. Okay, another part to this, again, just going back to, we talked about it a couple times, but for many people, we're seeing how they're frustrated maybe with some of the components of the cloud migration tool or config packages or other things like that. And so Smart Connect is really something that can be an important part of your mix too, because a lot of times people, when they're maybe moving over those master records, this is a time you're changing things, right? You're maybe doing a transformation of the customer IDs or vendor IDs. Obviously, account structure is vastly different. And sometimes people are taking this opportunity to not just map their segments of their account in GP to dimensions. Some people are saying, hey, let's actually really evaluate this, and maybe we're making some very, very wholesale changes to this. So Smart Connect gives you those tools where you can do that in Excel, and you can move that data up, and whether it's the master records or the open transactions, we can handle those kinds of things and transform that data to what you need. So again, E1 has the solutions, whether it be just displaying that history, or again, if you have to move in those open and master records, we can handle that as well. Okay. One thing before I get to Q&A, this is kind of an important thing. If you do both Smart Connect and Popdock at the same time, there is a 20% off on this subscription for a whole year. And so that is, again, if you're looking at the whole solution to make sure your customers are happy, this is a great way of doing that. Okay, let's get into back to Q&A. I answered a few of them earlier, but there's a few more. So let's dig in. Okay, I got to scroll up. A lot of good questions in here. Okay, question was, does Popdock hold the document attachments from GP? So let's say you'd use document attach and had that attached. Is Popdock able to do that? The current revision of the Popdock data lake upload tool doesn't do the extraction out of the blobs inside of there, but that is something that the team is working on, and we're going to try to get that to you in the coming month or two, so that you have that capability of being able to extract any of those things inside the document attach. And then we're going to have some more generic ones, because not everybody uses GP document attach. I know some people are using things like RecLogic, or who knows, all kinds of other tools that may be storing documents inside of there. So we're trying to find a way that we can, with the tool, give you the flexibility to extract out those documents, upload them to the data lake, and most importantly, allow you to access those documents and view them. Good question. So, yep, okay, second part of that. Should Popdock be installed on the SQL Server or a separate application, separate server? Your call on that one. We don't require it to be on a separate server. Some people will put it on a workstation machine. So whatever you find is going to give you the best access to the SQL data and has a good upload speed. Good question. Okay, yep, just some clarifications on the document attached, looks like. Okay, if there are multiple smart lists based on the same data, will the data be uploaded multiple times? Yes, it will, right? So if you have 20 smart lists that are based upon that data, it's going to bring each of them up there. So that is something, the way it is structured. Okay, so we said, assuming this is a good solution for moving old versions of nav, etc., into BC without migration, so we can have a clean install and still see history. Yeah, we didn't focus a lot on the nav piece today, but this is becoming a larger portion of this as well. Is that we know a lot of the nav base has heavy customizations a lot of times, and the simple migration doesn't really work for them a lot of times. It's really a re-implementation. So this is a great way to be able to view all that old nav data. So yep, great question. When we're talking about archiving, is it similar to Professional Advantage's data archive, or explain how to handle that? Um, it's not. I think it's a bit different, right? Because this is more if you're choosing to move off of GP, it's making this history available somewhere. It doesn't have to be. I guess I should be careful with that. It doesn't have to be, but this is not like cleaning anything out of tables. This is really just moving what was in a database. It's moving it to the data lake so that you can access that later on. So yeah, great question. Okay, another question, is it appending or overwriting? Yeah, we are, today, everything is gonna overwrite it. So a lot of scenarios we see is when someone maybe is running the initial, and then right before they go live, they may want to run it again, or maybe more than one time. So it is just going to overwrite everything that's inside of there as opposed to putting incremental on there. Okay, does the combined view, again, the example I showed with Aaron Fitz with both BC and GP data, a replacement for having to do data migration for historical records? Um, yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that's kind of the focus of what we're trying to bring to people, is that this is a way that, without having to bring in all of the transactions and close years and things like that, and getting it basically muddying up the new system with all that history, this still allows us the visibility into that history without necessarily bringing it all in. So that example of a combination list, or we call it a merge list, we're able to pull in from more than one place and again, show that inside of there. Cool. Okay, we got a wow. Thank you. um, Here's another one. Okay. How does Popdock push open invoice transactions over so the user can do cash receipts on those invoices? So Popdock doesn't push open stuff, right? That's where like Smart Connect would be used to bring in the open transactions. We're just really giving you visibility into that list. Okay, we have somebody else. So we've used the tool to move GP attachments table into the data lake. The attachments appear in Popdock with a download link. However, they fail to download. Oh, okay. Um, he's saying, asking if there's a field type that might need to. We might need to look at your setup on that one, Stephen. So you should be able to use that part of it and see those attachments. Okay, we got another question. Is this available for Dynamics AX? We have done this a few times on some older versions of like on-premise AX, and going directly to the SQL tables instead of like through web services. So that's really how we've been doing those. We've had a number of those AX on-prem go to like Business Central. And so we can do the exact same thing with the SQL option that we have in the data lake upload tool. We can move all of that history and make that available. Okay, can I use Power BI or Jet Reports to pull both live BC data and imported GP data in one report? Yes, absolutely. When you build a custom list inside of Business Central, or sorry, inside of Popdock that involve Business Central data and GP data, it's now one list. We have an API. We have documentation that says here's how you can call our API and pull that data in right into Power BI, for example. So yes, you can do that. Okay, a couple more, and then I need to wrap up. Thanks for all the questions. This is great. Okay, question was what makes Smart Connect better than the config packages? I think for a lot of people, we've heard just the performance of them. Smart Connect is overall a lot faster at interacting with that Business Central API. The second part, I did touch on this a little bit earlier, but one of the things is that there's oftentimes you have to run in a sequence. You may have to run, this process as a config package, this process, then this process. So you might have to run 3 different things before you can actually bring in something like a sales order, for example. Well, with Smart Connect, you have the capability of doing all those things in one pass, right? I can pass everything in, and it'll if I want to create those things at the same time. So you don't necessarily have to, have a reliance on everything else. So that's probably just a couple quick little things, I guess, on what makes Smart Connect just so much more powerful than that. Okay, I like the idea of pushing versus pulling data. I would like to see this replace the gateway that you currently have. Something like the ability to push data up to the data lake twice a day. Okay, sounds good. Thanks for that. We'll take that into consideration. Okay, somebody asked if I could show the screen again that had additional resources. Yeah, I'll show it. And again, we're gonna make this available. We're gonna make this available and this deck available as well. So there you go. There's some of that additional documentation for you there. Okay, another question, does it do the smart list favorites, I'm guessing, are only the default smart lists? Today, it is only doing basically the default smart list. So you would have to recreate any of the favorites that you want on that. Okay. All right, let me take one last one and then I think I'll wrap it up. Is there a limitation on the amount of data that can be migrated? I'll be careful saying yes or no on this. I'm sure there is some limitation. We have looked at some that are, getting close to a terabyte of data that we have done successfully, but a lot of the issues arise with making sure that we can access that data in an appropriate way afterwards, right? If you have a humongous sales transaction history, we need to make sure that you can access it in an appropriate amount of time. So we haven't really seen a limit yet, but I'm sure there are some you could get to a certain point. But for most GP customers, I don't anticipate any issue. Okay, I think I'll stop with the questions. Maybe just to wrap up on the last piece of this here is that thank you for attending. Appreciate your time. I know we actually went over. We just had a ton of questions, so thank you for that. But if you do have any more questions that you didn't get answered, please do just message sales@e1solutions.com and they will track down the right resource for you. So thank you for your time today, and we'll talk to you all soon.